There are two ways to approach Gornaya Shoria. Either we see it as an unusual but purely natural rock formation in Siberia, or we see it as the largest man-made stone structure of all time. And indeed, the alternative camp is firmly convinced that the latter is the case. But how is that even possible? How could the inhabitants of the past, thousands of years ago, have managed to move such enormous loads and then pile them up into a coherent structure? Today, we'll show you the spectacular theories circulating about Gornaya Shoria. So does history really need to be rewritten? Or do we sometimes tend to underestimate the amazing abilities of Mother Nature? Be sure to stick around until the end and join us in getting to the bottom of this exciting mystery. Our ancestors created veritable, colossal structures. Of course, there are the world-famous stone structures such as Stonehenge and the Pyramids of Giza, whose exact origins continue to fuel exciting debates to this day. But when it comes to the largest known stone blocks in history, the trail inevitably leads to present-day Lebanon. More precisely, to the gigantic monoliths that tower over the Baalbek quarry and weigh between 1,000 and 1,650 tons. Officially, these stone monsters are attributed to the Romans, who are said to have crafted the XXL monoliths to transport them to the nearby Temple District, where they were to form the foundations of sacred monumental buildings. However, exactly how the huge blocks were supposed to be moved from A to B remains a mystery. But who knows, perhaps it was their enormous size that ultimately ensured that the Baalbek monoliths remained in place forever. But if the Romans really had to admit that they had overestimated themselves in their architectural megalomania, the following seems even more confusing. After all, they did successfully manage to transport chunks of this size from the quarry and incorporate them into their sanctuaries on another occasion. To understand what this is all about, we need to take a look at the Temple of Jupiter and examine its podium, the so-called trilithon. This consists of three almost ridiculously large stone blocks, each weighing 800 tons. And just so we're clear, that's roughly equivalent to the weight of 7 blue whales. And that's not all. The trilithon does not even form the lowest level of the podium. It stands on top of the layer of blocks, each weighing 350 tons. In other words, the Romans must have somehow managed to transport their stone monsters to the temple complex and maneuver them into position so that they could be placed in their intended location. Ultimately, however, the giant monoliths were not just placed there any old how. They were positioned so perfectly that they fit together exactly. But how on earth did the Romans do it? Well, some alternative researchers answer this question with not at all. Simply because it wasn't the Romans who created the trilithon. According to them, it had already been completed long before the Romans arrived in Baalbek, and they used the existing structures to build their own on top of them. But regardless of whether it was a Roman construction crew or some other people who created and moved the monumental objects, there is no question that we are dealing with a work of human hands, and that the trilithon is home to the largest monoliths ever built. But what if that's not true? What if even larger stone blocks had been incorporated into structures in another part of the world? Stone blocks that weigh not just 800 tons, but a whopping 3,000 tons. Well, then we would be right at home with the exciting speculations that have always surrounded Gornaya Shoria in Siberia. The largest stone structures of all time? According to Adam Rees, the 3 blocks of the trilithon weigh a total of 2,400 tons, converted into blue whales, that's 18, and a few squashed marine mammals. And yet, this immense weight is still significantly less than that of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths. As mentioned above, this is estimated at around 3,000 tons, and that's per block. However, we are not talking about stone colossi scattered loosely across the landscape, but a kind of connected wall that stretches over a length of 200 meters and consists of stones that are 20 meters long on average. But how do researchers actually view this impressive structure? Well, that always depends on who you ask. According to conservative experts, this structure has as much to do with the work of an advanced civilization as any other mountain, namely, nothing at all. In the Bergschirien region of southern Siberia, Gornaya Shoria is said to be a pure outgrowth of nature. More precisely, the megaliths form the ridges and summit of the 1,200-meter-high Kayulum mountain, and they are officially the result of a combination of various geological processes and intensive weathering of the rock. However, this is countered by the assumption that humans have given nature a helping hand in this place. After all, Gornaya Shoria would provide clear proof that our ancestors possessed exotic wonder technologies that we cannot even dream of today. Anyone who takes a closer look at the alternative theories will inevitably come across the name Georgy Sidorov. He is said to have discovered the formation in 2013 and to have been deeply impressed by its size and elaboration. Sidorov compared the splendor of this site to that of the pyramids of Giza, and there is also talk of conspicuous circular drill holes and sometimes melting traces. And yet, this is where things start to get really controversial. When Sidorov and his companions investigated Gornaya Shoria, their compasses are said to have gone haywire. Against this backdrop, the researchers suspected that they were dealing with a negative geomagnetic field that pointed to advanced ancient knowledge. In concrete terms, this means that the supporters of the construction theory believe that the creators of Gornaya Shoria harnessed forces that go beyond the limits of our modern horizons. Well, so far, so controversial and highly speculative. But if we just go along with the crazy idea that the site really does have an artificial origin, many more pressing questions immediately arise. Why on earth was such an imposing structure built in such a harsh environment? And above all, what purpose did Gornaya Shoria serve? The question of the creator culture. Of course, we should not ignore the factor of time in our search for clues. And lo and behold, the age of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths is estimated to be at least 10,000 years. So, we are at the end of the last ice age, and thus in an era when humans officially began to settle down, cultivate crops, and domesticate animals. And apparently, during this radical upheaval, our ancestors also managed to hoist countless stone blocks weighing thousands of tons to the summit of a remote mountain and pile them up into an impressive structure. But let's be honest, how could that have been possible? Well, to understand this, we need to delve even deeper into the world of alternative history and recall the fundamental beliefs of men like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. This belief holds that long before our time, a highly advanced civilization flourished only to be destroyed by a devastating flood at the end of the last ice age, and thus erased from our collective historical memory. Following the apocalypse, however, the few survivors spread out across the rest of the world to reveal their superior knowledge to simpler peoples and bring them the gift of civilization. This is also the reason why so many different cultures tell the story of an all-consuming flood from which higher beings emerged, and why we find gigantic stone structures such as the pyramids or the Gornaya Shoria megaliths in all corners of the world. And if you think it can't get any wackier, listen up. Some people actually believe that the monumental structures of ancient times weren't even built by humans, but rather by actual giants or aliens. We all know what the conservative research community thinks of such theories, but what about the hypothetical purpose of Gornaya Shoria? Well, if it really is an artificially created site, it could have once been the scene of religious gatherings and rituals. Alternatively, it could have served as a starting point for astronomical observations. And who knows, maybe the Yeti has already taken a look at one or two stars from here. Yes, you heard that right. The mythical snowman has allegedly been sighted several times in the region. However, since the legendary creature is usually found in the Himalayas, it would have had to travel far to get here. But before we get too carried away in the world of legends, we should perhaps ask ourselves whether things really have to be so far-fetched. After all, is the most likely explanation for the existence of Gornaya Shoria really that forgotten high-tech cultures or even supernatural creatures were at work here? Or are we sometimes better off acknowledging the remarkable architectural skills of Mother Nature? In any case, you would be well advised to acknowledge your remarkable clicking skills. Simply press the thumb icon and subscribe so you never miss another video from us. See you soon!